Hey, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining. So I'm heading over to Alexandria for the annual Old Town Festival of Speed and Style. Okay, so here I am in Alexandria, Virginia. This is a great car show they have every year, and they close down King Street and some of the side streets near the waterfront. And there are just some fantastic cars here. It's a hugely crowded event as well. So taking a look down one of the side streets, this is Fairfax. And at the corner of Fairfax and King. And if we look down King Street, you can see the crowds. I mean, it's fantastic. This, I believe, is the 5th year for this event. And at the end of King Street, that's the Potomac River. That's the waterfront. So let me try to zoom in. And there it is. Again, quite a festival. And it's a nice day today. Cloudy, but not rainy at all. So it's perfect. So here we have a classic Ford muscle car. The Boss 429 was made in 1969 and 1970. And they also made the Boss 302 to compete in the Trans Am races. But the 429 was manufactured so they could compete in NASCAR, the NASCAR Cup Series, the Grand National Division, against cars such as the Mopar with the 426 Hemis in them. And talk about a classic, the 64 GTO. And this one's a convertible and a 4-speed. And this is arguably one of the first real muscle cars that started the movement in the mid-60s. I mean, there were some other cars as well, so it's debatable. But again, this is a classic muscle car. You know, nobody that knows muscle cars hasn't heard of the 64 GTO. So that is just, this is just a fantastic car. And now heading up the road, we're looking at some of the exotics, looking at some Ferraris here. Again, a little more expensive, at least when they were new. The American muscle cars from the late 60s and early 70s are around the same price as these, but these started off a lot more expensive. And again, these are just beautiful cars. I would love to drive one of those Ferraris. It just must be such a thrill. And here, one of the Kings. This is a Ferrari 488 Spider. Just such a cool looking car. I can't imagine what it would be like to drive down the road in this. People can't help but notice it and hear it as well. These are powered by a relatively small V8 engine. It's a 3.9 liter, but it's twin turbocharged, and it's got at least, I think, 660 horsepower, maybe more, as they tuned them up in the preceding years. Great cars, fast cars. So talk about a classic American muscle car. This is a 71 Chevelle SS. And we saw the classic Ford earlier. This is the classic Chevy muscle car. Beautiful convertible. Now, I don't see the cowl induction hood. I don't see any emblems that say 396 or 454, which were common engines in the SS's. So I'm assuming this is a 350, which was the standard engine in 71 for the Chevelle SS. So I'm guessing that's what it was. It could also be a clone. I don't know, but it's even if it's a clone, this is in showroom condition. Just beautiful. And back in the day, a common sight in cup holders of those cars was an open can of beer, Schlitz in this case. And right next to the Chevelle SS, another Chevy, the Chevy Corvette. And I think this is a 61. And you better like red if you like this car, but this is an absolutely pristine Corvette. Beautiful, beautiful condition. How cool to drive this thing around. Look at that dash. Wow. Here we have another American-made classic from the early 60s. This is a 1962 Ford Thunderbird. and it is so cool. And these convertibles in the day were just so much fun to watch go up and down. If you wanted to put the top down, you push a button, that trunk opens, as you can see, and the convertible top goes in, and then the trunk closes, and then of course the opposite when you put the top back up. Now the first 3 years, I believe it was the first 3 years in the late 50s of the Thunderbird, they were smaller two-seater cars, and they were competing with the Corvette. But Ford then decided to make it a four-seater and a larger car, and when they did that, actually, their sales went way up. So even though, they kind of decided not to have a little two-seater sports car, they did sell a lot better when they went to the four-seater and the larger Thunderbird. And by the way, this is a pretty powerful V8 engine. As you can see by that racetrack air cleaner, it's got 3 two-barrel Holley carburetors. And there's some more information about this particular Thunderbird. Quite a mover in the day, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So here we have a Ford Pantera. The body's actually made by Di Tommaso, but it has a Ford engine. It's a mid-engine car, and it's got a 351 Cleveland engine. And Ford imported these through Lincoln Mercury dealers. I think it was like 71 through 75. And the Pantera was still made sort of in much smaller numbers, but again, not through Ford dealers or Lincoln Mercury dealers after that. I think they were made till like 1992 or something, various models of them. But again, very cool cars, mid-engine Ford V8, but at the same time, an exotic with a Di Tommaso body. So basically, you could call this a hybrid. It's a Di Tommaso Ford hybrid. And speaking of hybrids, this is a Ford Cortina Lotus, or a Lotus Cortina. Ford like to call it Cortina Lotus. Lotus like to call it Lotus Cortina. In any event, Ford gave Lotus a bunch of the Cortina bodies, which were Ford European bodies, and Lotus did all the suspension work, the interior tweaking. The engine, of course, was a twin-cam, four-cylinder, and just a really, really cool car. You don't see many of these at all. Very rare here in the United States, especially nowadays. But they were made, I think, 1963 through 66. Very, very cool cars. And this one, I saw this last year. It is just in beautiful, beautiful condition. It's like new. Now, Colin Chapman, the founder of Lotus, must have been really busy when he was putting these together, because at the same time they were getting ready to put out the Lotus Elan in 1962. And, the early Lotuses were kind of like kit cars, or they would take something like the Cortina and they would tweak it, their suspension and engine and so forth. But of course, nowadays Lotus are really sophisticated, cool, exotic cars. So speaking of hybrids, you could call this a hybrid, an Italian-American hybrid, because in the early 60s there were some California guys that wanted to put together a car that was sort of an American version of an Aston Martin, and they found an Italian coach builder to build the body, and they put Buick engines in them, and this one has a 300 cubic inch Buick Wildcat engine. They didn't sell many. They sold like less than 100 of these. I know Pat Boone, for one, TV movie star, singer Pat Boone in the early 60s had one of these as well. And as you can see, there was such a celebratory feeling at this car show this weekend. People loved it. And here we have a 1936 Ford Model 68. So this has been around quite a while, but it doesn't look it. It's in beautiful condition. And this, of course, as you can see, is a convertible. I didn't have to say that. But this actually had a V8 engine. This had one of the first years, I think 1934 was the first year of the flathead Ford V8. And this was a 36 model with a flathead Ford V8. And it had a whopping 85 horsepower. So, it would probably, top end would be about 65, maybe 70 miles an hour. Even with that V8. Now you know why they modified those flatheads moving forward. Yes, that's right. For those of you who remember the TV show Get Smart, he used a Sunbeam Tiger for at least a couple of years. And the Sunbeam Tiger, they took the Sunbeam Alpine, which was an English sports car, and they dropped a Ford V8 into it. And it was actually sold through Chrysler dealers for a couple of years. And yeah, they were originally going to compete with the Cobra, the Ford Cobra. But of course, that didn't really happen. They're kind of rare these days. You don't see many of them, but really cool cars. A little sports car with a V8 engine. And another British sports car, of course, the classic MG. This is a 1960 MGA 1600, and the styling looks a little older than 1960, kind of. I think the design goes back to almost the early 50s, but again, really cool, beautiful car. And by the way, the 1600cc engine that came in this car is not very powerful. It only had like 80 horsepower. I think the 0 to 60 was something like 13 seconds, something like that. So here we have a Volvo P1800, and these are classics made from really the early 60s through the early 70s. And they were really fun cars to drive. Hat tip to a couple of high school buddies. My friend Adam has one now that he's had for years, and he's rebuilding it as we speak. And also, my buddy Wiz, he had one of these in high school, and we used to drive it around. Fun cars, cool-looking cars, kind of an interesting, one-of-a-kind look. Nothing else really looks like a P1800. But definitely were fun cars to drive. So I had to definitely highlight a Porsche. So here's the Porsche I'm highlighting for this show. It's the Porsche diesel tractor. It's a vineyard tractor, and I guess they call it a vineyard tractor because it's a very narrow gauge to fit in the vineyards in between the grapevines and so forth. They didn't import many into the United States, but Porsche made tractors, I think, until 1962 or 63, something like that. And this is a cool one. There's the engine, if you can see it. But obviously this has been totally restored. This is like a museum piece. And very, very rare, especially to see a Porsche name on a tractor. So here we have an Acura NSX, and when these came out in 1990, they were really fantastic cars because they were trying to compete with more exotics, and they were really reasonably priced. And in addition to that, they were really easy to drive at the limit without wiping out. They were just fun, easy cars to drive. And they started off in 1990 with a 3-liter all-aluminum V6 with that variable valve timing engine that Honda created. And then I think around 97 they went to a 3.2 liter. But great cars for the money, fun cars to drive. So they stopped making these in 2005, and the second generation NSX came out in 2016.
Organizers of this event, to the city of Alexandria, and we look forward to seeing everybody here next year. And this event, we're going to make it annual. It's going to go as long as we can keep having some awesome cars show up. So right now we're going to prepare for low ball. Cars start to exit, and but otherwise frequent the businesses. Enjoy Old Town Alexandria and this beautiful day.
So obviously I couldn't get to every single car that was there, so I thought I'd highlight some of the ones that I thought were interesting or cool or a little out of the ordinary. Fun, really fun day here today.
All right, and I just heard May 18th, 2025. May 18th.
So that's it from Alexandria. Great time today. The weather was perfect. It was overcast, but it never rained. And as you can see, I really was fancy about putting the lapel mic on and hiding the wires. But it was a great time. There were so many cars here, all kinds, exotics, as you could see, and you know, one of a kinds. But this will be it until next year from Alexandria. In the meantime, if you haven't already done so, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell. Those things help a lot. Take care. We'll see you next time.